Mom decided that I should marry my cousin, threw a huge engagement party, and now my cousin's boyfriend is furious. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and my husband, who's 27, and I have been married just over a year now, together for 4. Before getting married, we spent so much time making sure we were both on board with the big things: marriage, our future, expectations, all of it. I really thought we saw eye to eye on everything that mattered. I love him, he's sweet, helpful, and right up until last week, he was honestly everything I ever dreamed of in a partner. But last week, everything changed so abruptly, it still makes my head spin. One night, out of nowhere, he sits down and tells me he wants to talk about something. I figured he'd had a bad day, or he was annoyed about some little household thing, the usual. Instead, he tells me his best guy friend and his wife are polyamorous. Apparently, he and this friend have been talking about it a lot lately, and now suddenly, he thinks maybe he'd want to try that, too. Just like that. He asks what I think. Instantly, I feel physically sick. I always thought we were solid. We've had a great sex life. I've never had any reason to suspect he might want anyone else. I told him straight away, I'm not interested. I want to be monogamous with him, always. I meant it. Then comes the follow-up, will I at least read about polyamory, just to be open-minded? I said no. I didn't need to do research, I already know myself. Next, he asked if I'd at least consider it, think on it. Something about that question just flipped a switch inside me, instant revulsion. I couldn't even look at him. I told him I was too upset to keep talking, that I needed some space, and I slept in the guest room that night. Since then, every time I see him, that ick feeling only grows. He keeps trying to backtrack, makes excuses, but I'm not stupid. I know he meant it when he said he wanted to be polyamorous. I can't even blame him for bringing it up, honestly. It's the fact he kept pushing, like my feelings just didn't matter, like he thought he could wear me down. What else would he pressure me about if I ever said no again? And if it's already on his mind to sleep with someone else, what stops him from sneaking around if I won't agree to it? Right now, I'm still in the guest room. The idea keeps looping in my mind, maybe I should just ask for a divorce now, before we waste more time, when it's still relatively painless to divide everything and walk away. He'd be free to do whatever, and I could find someone who actually wants monogamy as much as I do. The thought devastates me, but it feels like it's going to be painful no matter what I do. Even though I still love him, I don't think I can unhear and unsee my husband asking me for an open relationship. The idea of him touching me makes my skin crawl. He keeps telling me I'm punishing him for just asking a question, but honestly, what did he think would happen? I'm torn. Is divorce an overreaction? But this ick is overwhelming. It feels like we'll never get back to how we were before. Just to be on the safe side, I made an appointment for an STI test. My gyno was able to squeeze me in today, so I'll get some peace of mind. I don't want to believe he cheated, but it's better to be careful. A part of me wonders if this whole polyamory thing is about someone specific, like his friend's wife, or even his friend himself. He's never mentioned being bisexual, but that doesn't mean he isn't. I don't know them well enough to speculate, so I'm choosing to believe there's no weird plotting on their end, just that my husband latched onto his friend's lifestyle and ran with it. I'm not giving him the silent treatment or ignoring him, but I'm not ready to re-engage on this topic. I need to be calm for that, and his behavior lately doesn't exactly make it easy. Every time he mentions it, my disgust with him grows. The real issue isn't even the polyamory question anymore, it's that he refused to accept my boundary the first time I said no. I'm planning to meet with a lawyer, just to go over my options. Honestly, I don't have much faith in counseling right now, but I'd give it a try, just so I know I did all I could. I'll throw the idea out tonight and see where that leads. When I brought up counseling, he shot it down, said he doesn't see why it's necessary, he just wants to go back to how things were. But it's not that simple. You can't just slap a band-aid on this and move on. A broken bone needs to actually heal. I asked if there was someone in particular he wanted to sleep with. He said no, but I know that look, he's not a convincing liar. He insists it was just an idea, no one is involved and nothing happened, but refuses to show me the texts with his friend, so I'd at least know what really got this started. He says he wants to protect his friend's privacy. Maybe he's not cheating, but something's hidden, and that's bad enough. I have a lawyer appointment in a few days. I've decided not to make any rash decisions until then. I'm also taking a weekend trip alone to visit my grandparents, clear my head, and get some space. Once I've had a professional's advice and my test results, maybe things will feel a little clearer. Thank you for the kind words and encouragement. For what it's worth, plenty of people in my circle are poly, and it works for them, even if it's not drama-free. After 24 years together, my husband and I have talked about it hypothetically, found it intriguing, but always chose to water our own lawn instead. I remember a dinner with friends where someone found herself in a similar spot. One friend's advice still echoes in my head: look him in the eyes and ask, are you really okay with kissing me goodnight right after I've had another man's D in my mouth? Because that's what you're asking for. Part of me is tempted to be petty in return, make a dating profile and let him scroll through the attention I'd get. But for now, I just need to focus on finding a way forward that doesn't leave me feeling ill every time I think about my own husband. Update 1. I took the advice I'd received and went ahead with a full STI panel. Thankfully, everything came back clear, which was a huge relief. I brought up the idea of counseling to my husband, hoping maybe it could help, but he dismissed it immediately, said he didn't think it was necessary. Deep down, I knew it wouldn't change how I felt and decided there wasn't any point in pushing for something he didn't want. His behavior changed almost overnight. Suddenly, he's extremely protective of his phone. This all started after I asked to see a message conversation between him and his poly friend, just so I could understand where everything had gone wrong, to see the context for myself. I would never go through his things or violate his privacy, but his secretiveness said more than any message ever could. It didn't really matter anymore whether there was something actually going on or if it was just the anticipation of it. His shady behavior was enough to make the truth clear to me. I found myself tempted, at times, to reach out to some of his friends and get their side of things. But in the end, if there was infidelity, I realized I didn't want the weight of any more details. I was already on shaky ground, and some truths are better left unknown when you're just trying to survive the moment. Last weekend, I sat down with my grandparents and really opened up to them. They were a rock for me, steadfast and gentle, listening to everything. Then, I spoke with a lawyer about my options, and I started to see the next steps more clearly. Right now, I'm preparing to move forward with the divorce. There are no children, no shared property or debt, nothing to tie us together except for this lease. We'd put off buying a house until I finished residency, so unraveling the financials will be straightforward. Our apartment lease is up in a few months, so my plan is to move out after telling him, and just pay my share of the rent until the renewal comes around. I'm heartbroken. This is not how I pictured things ending. Still, I'm convinced there's no better move for me. I don't trust him, and frankly, his actions since the start of all this have repulsed me. If he'd been willing to be honest, to work with me to rebuild trust, maybe things could have been different. But he hasn't, and I can't keep investing effort into something he clearly doesn't value anymore. I know I'll be okay with time. For now, I just have to do what's best for myself, and that means walking away before the hole gets any deeper. Update 2. My husband asked for a polyamorous relationship. Instantly, my instinct screamed no, and I made it clear, this wasn't something I wanted. He wouldn't let it go. He kept badgering me about it, refusing to give me the space I desperately needed. It escalated quickly. He became furious when I stopped discussing it with him, and even angrier when I refused to sleep in the same bed while I tried to calm myself. His whole demeanor gave me such an intense ick that I realized, suddenly and with a clarity that terrified me, that I simply couldn't do this anymore. Divorce became my only option, and I went to see a lawyer to get things moving. Deep down, a gnawing suspicion told me there must have already been someone else. That suspicion turned out to be horribly, predictably right. The wife from a poly couple he claimed to be just friends with called me. She sounded distraught, and as soon as she started talking, I understood why. My husband had been involved with both her and her husband for months, all while hiding it from me. Apparently, he confessed to them that I was clueless. To their credit, they broke up with him immediately. That phone call landed just as my ex suddenly started trying so hard to make it up to me, frantically apologizing, without ever admitting any actual cheating or telling the truth. Around the same time, a fellow resident needed a roommate, and I jumped at the chance, quietly moving forward with plans to leave. I filled in my parents and a handful of close friends. My lawyer said I should tell my ex about the divorce before the papers got served, so I planned to have the talk right before moving out. I was stuck in this awful standoff, living with a cheating ex who had no idea that I knew the whole story. Originally, the plan was to move next weekend, but things deteriorated fast. This week, my ex became increasingly agitated that I wouldn't respond to his attempts at smoothing things over. Then everything crossed a line. On Thursday, he tried to get into bed with me, ignoring every clear no I gave. That was it. I managed to get emergency leave from work and, with my parents' help, moved most of my things out while he was at work on Friday. My lawyer filed the divorce papers that same day. When he got home, he did not take it well. I laid it out as simply as possible. I knew he cheated, and I had filed for divorce. I told him I had no intention of making this a public spectacle, especially since I understood that his bisexuality could put him in an incredibly unsafe place with his family. I told him it was best if we stuck to the story that he cheated and left it at that. From there, he could contact me only through my lawyer. He absolutely lost it, yelled, collapsed crying, pleaded that he wouldn't accept the divorce, that he deserved a chance to fix things. My dad stepped in, positioned himself between us, and made sure my ex didn't try anything to stop me from leaving. As we drove away, I called my in-laws. I told them I was divorcing him because he cheated, thanked them for welcoming me into their family, and explained that this was probably goodbye. They were shocked, more than I expected, but handled the news with remarkable grace. With everything unraveling so quickly, I blocked my ex on everything except email, unable to handle any more of his direct contact. My parents had rented an Airbnb, so I crashed with them, and everything finally hit me. I just broke down. I'm moved in now. That chapter of my life is over, no matter how surreal it feels. I've heard through a mutual friend that my ex has become suicidal. I hope, honestly, that he gets help. I can't deny that his behavior these last few weeks has seemed so far from himself that it makes me wonder if he's slipping into some kind of mental health crisis. Still, I'm finished. I'm not okay, not yet, but I know I will be. For now, I'm focusing on work and healing myself, step by painful step. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since I moved out, and I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. Last Monday, I was pulling a double at the hospital when security called me down to the lobby. My ex was there, disheveled and rambling to anyone who would listen about how I'd destroyed his life over a misunderstanding. The security guard said he'd been there for over an hour, asking different staff members to page me. I had to get a restraining order. But that's not even the worst part. 2 days later, I got a call from his sister, someone I'd always gotten along with well. She was crying, asking if we could meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I said yes. What she told me made my stomach drop. Apparently, my ex had been spinning a completely different story to his family. He told them I had an affair with a colleague at the hospital, that I was the one who wanted to open things up, and that when he refused, I left him for the other man. His parents have been calling him daily, telling him he's better off without me, that I never deserved him anyway, but his sister knew something was off. She'd seen how he'd been acting erratic for months before our separation, staying out late, being secretive with his phone, mood swings she'd never seen before. When I told her the truth about the polyamory situation and the cheating, she went completely silent for almost 5 minutes. Then she dropped another bombshell. 3 months ago, she'd walked in on him at his friend's house during what was supposed to be a guy's night. She found him in a compromising position with both the friend and the friend's wife. At the time, he begged her not to say anything, claimed it was just experimentation and that he was going to tell me when he was ready. She'd been carrying this guilt ever since, wondering if she should have warned me. I felt sick all over again. Not just because of the timeline, he'd been cheating for even longer than I thought, but because his own sister had been wrestling with whether to protect him or protect me. Then yesterday, things took an even stranger turn. The wife from the poly couple called me again. She sounded panicked, asking if I'd heard from my ex recently. Apparently, he'd been showing up at their workplace, their gym, even their grocery store. He'd been texting them obsessively, alternating between begging them to take him back and threatening to expose their lifestyle to their conservative employers and families. She told me something that made my blood run cold. Before they got involved with him, he'd told them that our marriage was already over, that we were just waiting for the lease to end to make it official. He painted himself as this lonely, neglected husband whose wife had already emotionally checked out. They never would have gotten involved if they'd known I was completely in the dark. But here's the thing that really got to me. She said that toward the end, he'd become obsessed with the idea of me finding out. He would bring me up constantly during their encounters, wondering out loud what I would think, if I would be jealous, if it would make me fight for him. It was like he wanted to get caught. I've been staying with my new roommate, trying to focus on work and moving forward, but it's hard when reminders keep surfacing. Yesterday, I found out that 2 other residents have been gossiping about my affair. Apparently, my ex's version of events has been making its way through medical circles. Somehow. My program director pulled me aside this morning. She'd heard the rumors and wanted to make sure I was okay, that my personal situation wasn't affecting my work. I had to sit there and professionally explain that my marriage had ended due to my ex-husband's infidelity, not mine, while trying to maintain some dignity. She was understanding, but I could see the concern in her eyes about potential drama following me into the workplace. The restraining order hearing is next week. Part of me feels guilty. He's clearly spiraling, and despite everything, I don't want to see him destroy his life. But I also can't have him showing up at my workplace or harassing people in my life. His sister texted me yesterday saying he'd moved back in with his parents temporarily and was starting therapy, which I hope is true. I keep thinking about the conversation with his sister, about how she'd been carrying this secret for months. It makes me wonder what other signs I missed, what other people knew things they weren't telling me. The betrayal feels deeper now. It wasn't just him lying to me, it was this whole network of people who knew pieces of the truth while I was completely oblivious. My lawyer says the divorce should be finalized within the next month since he stopped contesting it. I thought I'd feel relieved when this was all over, but right now I just feel exhausted. I'm angry at him, obviously, but I'm also angry at myself for being so naive, for trusting so completely that I ignored whatever red flags might have been there. I'm trying to focus on the future, on rebuilding. But some days, like today, it feels like the past keeps finding new ways to hurt me. Update 4. I thought things were finally settling down. The restraining order was approved, the divorce was moving forward smoothly, and I was starting to find my rhythm at work again. I should have known better than to expect peace. Last Thursday, I was grabbing coffee before my shift when I noticed a woman staring at me from across the cafe. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. After a few minutes, she approached my table with this nervous energy that immediately put me on edge. "Are you Sarah?" she asked, using my real name. When I nodded, she sat down without being invited. "I'm Jessica. I think we need to talk about your ex-husband." My stomach dropped. Jessica turned out to be the wife of one of my ex's co-workers, someone I'd met briefly at a company party months ago. What she told me made me realize that even when I thought I knew the full extent of his lies, I was still only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Apparently, my ex had been telling people at his office that I was mentally unstable. He'd been showing up to work with scratches on his arms, claiming I'd been physically abusive during our fights. He told them he was afraid to leave me alone, that I'd threatened to hurt myself if he ever left. Jessica said her husband had been encouraging my ex to document everything for his own protection. But here's where it gets worse. Jessica had never fully bought his story, especially after seeing how composed and professional I seemed the one time we'd met. So when she heard through the grapevine that we were divorcing and I was supposedly the cheater, something didn't add up. She did some digging. Turns out, my ex had been using his poor abused husband narrative to get sympathy from female coworkers. Jessica showed me screenshots that her husband had forwarded to her, messages where my ex was getting increasingly intimate with at least 2 different women from his office, using his sob story about our toxic marriage as an entry point. One of the message threads made me physically nauseous. He was telling this woman, Linda, that I had become sexually withholding and that he felt trapped and unloved. He described intimate details about our relationship that should never have been shared with anyone, painting me as this cold, manipulative person who used sex as a weapon. But the timeline didn't make sense. The messages Jessica showed me were dated from over 6 months ago, long before he ever brought up polyamory to me. He'd been laying groundwork for months, setting up this narrative where he was the victim and I was the villain, all while I thought we were happy. Jessica apologized for not reaching out sooner, but she said she'd been conflicted about getting involved in someone else's marriage drama. It was only when she heard that I supposedly had an affair that she realized how deep his lies went. After she left, I sat in that cafe for another hour, just trying to process everything. Then I called my lawyer. The really sick part? When I got home that evening, there was a letter in my mailbox. Not from him directly, he's not supposed to contact me, but from his mother. A handwritten note about how disappointed she was in me, how she'd always thought I was different from other girls, and how breaking her son's heart over some doctor at the hospital was beneath me. His family still believes his version. His sister tried to tell them the truth, but apparently, his parents think she's just being manipulated by me. They've completely bought into his victim narrative. I've been having panic attacks again. Yesterday, I was in the middle of rounds when another resident mentioned hearing that I'd been having an affair with Dr. Martinez from cardiology, a married man with 3 kids who I've maybe spoken to 5 times in my entire residency. The rumor mill has somehow connected me to him specifically, and now I'm terrified that his wife might hear these lies. My program director called me into her office again today. This time, it wasn't just concern, it was a warning. She told me that while she doesn't believe the rumors, the gossip is starting to affect the professional environment. She suggested I might want to consider transferring to a different program if things don't die down soon. I wanted to scream. He's managed to poison my workplace, turn his family against me, and create this whole elaborate fiction where I'm the monster and he's the victim, all while he was the one cheating with multiple people and spinning lies to manipulate even more women. But then something unexpected happened. This morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was from Linda, one of the women my ex had been messaging. She'd somehow gotten my number and wanted to meet. We're supposed to meet for lunch tomorrow. She sounded upset on the phone, said there were things I needed to know about what he'd been telling people, things that went beyond just the emotional manipulation. She mentioned something about photos, but wouldn't elaborate over the phone. I'm scared to find out what else he's been doing, but I also know I can't keep living in this nightmare where his lies are defining my reality. Whatever she has to tell me, it can't be worse than what I already know. Can it? Update 5. The lunch with Linda turned into the longest 2 hours of my life, and I'm still processing everything she told me. I thought I was prepared for whatever bombshell she was going to drop, but nothing could have prepared me for this. Linda showed up looking exhausted, clutching a folder like her life depended on it. She barely touched her salad while she laid out a timeline that made my ex's deception even more calculating than I'd imagined. She'd been corresponding with him for 8 months, starting just 2 months after our wedding. He'd approached her initially about work stuff, then gradually shifted to personal conversations about his troubled marriage. But here's what made my blood boil. He'd been sending her photos of me. Not inappropriate ones, thankfully, but candid shots he'd taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me sleeping, cooking dinner, even one of me crying during a movie night. He'd been using these to paint this narrative about how distant and cold I'd become. But the photos weren't the worst part. Linda showed me message screenshots where he'd been fantasizing about what it would be like when I inevitably left him. He'd written detailed scenarios about how he'd move on, how much better his life would be, how he'd finally be free to be himself. This wasn't a man who was afraid of losing his marriage, this was someone who was actively orchestrating its destruction while positioning himself as the victim. Then Linda dropped the real bombshell. My ex had been planning to ask for polyamory for months, but not because he wanted to explore with me. He'd been setting up this elaborate scenario where he'd ask, I'd say no, and then he could use my close-mindedness as justification to either cheat openly or leave me. He'd literally told Linda that he was going to give me a chance to be reasonable about opening our marriage, but that he was pretty sure she's too uptight for it. The whole thing was a setup. He never wanted to work through anything with me, he wanted me to be the bad guy so he could walk away guilt-free. But wait, it gets worse. Linda had been growing uncomfortable with their correspondence, especially after she realized he was married to someone who clearly had no idea what was happening. She'd started pulling back, which apparently sent him into a spiral. That's when he got more aggressive with the poly couple, more reckless with his behavior. She thinks he was getting desperate because his exit strategy wasn't working as smoothly as he'd planned. After Linda left, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just shaking. Then I called my lawyer and forwarded everything Linda had given me. My lawyer was furious. Apparently, some of what he'd been doing could potentially be considered harassment or even stalking, depending on how the photos were taken and shared. But the real kicker came that evening. I was at home, trying to decompress with a glass of wine, when my phone rang. It was Dr. Martinez's wife, Elena. My heart stopped. She was calling because someone had sent her anonymous messages warning her about her husband's supposed affair with me. She'd gotten photos of me from the hospital directory and detailed descriptions of times I'd allegedly been seen with her husband. Elena was surprisingly calm about it. She said she'd done some digging and realized the whole thing was fabricated. The times and locations didn't match her husband's schedule, and some of the evidence was clearly manipulated. But she wanted to warn me that whoever was doing this was escalating. We talked for over an hour. Elena is a lawyer, and she pointed out that what my ex was doing constituted a deliberate campaign of harassment designed to damage my reputation and career. She offered to help me document everything for a potential civil case. The next day at work, things came to a head. Dr. Martinez himself approached me during lunch. He'd heard about the rumors and wanted to clear the air. He was professional about it, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He told me that the department heads were starting to ask questions, and while he didn't believe the rumors, the situation was becoming disruptive for everyone involved. That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. I requested a meeting with the chief of staff and laid out everything: the divorce, the lies, the harassment, all of it. I brought the evidence Linda had given me, the timeline of events, and Elena's contact information as a witness to the fabricated affair allegations. The chief of staff listened without interruption, then made 2 phone calls. First to hospital security, then to the legal department. By the end of the day, my ex was banned from hospital grounds, and the legal department was drafting a cease and desist letter regarding the defamatory statements he'd been making about me and Dr. Martinez. But my ex wasn't done. Yesterday morning, I woke up to find that someone had created fake social media profiles using my photos and information. These profiles were posting explicit content and trying to connect with people from our residency program. It took me most of the day to get them taken down, and I have no idea how many people saw them before they were removed. His sister called me last night, crying. Apparently, he'd stolen photos from her phone, pictures from family gatherings that included me, and had been using them for God knows what. She'd confronted him, and he'd completely broken down, admitting to doing things that got out of hand but refusing to specify what. She said he was supposed to start therapy, but she didn't think he was actually going. I'm scared. Not just because of what he's already done, but because I feel like this is escalating in a way that I can't predict or control. My lawyer is pushing for criminal charges now, not just the restraining order. Elena has offered to represent me pro bono for a civil harassment case. The divorce is supposed to be finalized next week, but honestly, I don't think that's going to end this. If anything, I think it might make him more desperate. I've been staying at different places, sometimes with my roommate, sometimes with my parents, once even at the hospital's on-call rooms. I don't want to establish a pattern he can track. The scariest part is that I keep discovering new layers to his deception. Every time I think I understand the full scope of what he's been doing, someone else comes forward with another piece of the puzzle. How long has he been planning this? How many people has he manipulated? And what else is he capable of? I used to think I knew him better than anyone. Now I'm wondering if I ever knew him at all.